Chapter 7, Section 6 is called Multiplying a Polynomial by a Monomial. So these next couple of sections to kind of wrap up this chapter that we've been dealing with all these polynomials, this is going to be dealing with multiplication. So we're going to kind of start getting into how do you multiply these things together. Today we're going to isolate this to just multiplying a monomial, so a single term, into a polynomial, so something with bigger, more terms involved. In the future sections, we'll see when we need to multiply polynomials, so like a really big thing times another really big thing. Today, though, we're going to just kind of keep it simple with just taking a single, small term, monomial, and multiplying that to a bigger polynomial, okay? Now, we kind of already did a little bit of multiplying in the last section when we were adding and subtracting, specifically with the subtraction problems, because we had to multiply through the second set of parentheses, that -1. So we're kind of doing that same idea, is that we're going to be using the distributive property. The only difference here is that you are involving other numbers other than the -1 and letters. Okay, so we're going to kind of start to take what we've done in the last section and combine it with what we started with at the very beginning of this chapter when we were multiplying those monomials. If you remember when we multiplied monomials, you would multiply the regular coefficients, so the big numbers in front, and then with your letters, you have to add their exponents, okay? So we're bringing those rules back, and we're going to use them in this section here. So we're going to take, for this first example, this 3x, and we're going to distribute that in to all of these terms, okay? Now, one way that you could think of this is that you're basically taking 3x, and you're multiplying it times each of the terms after it. And that's what I wrote right underneath here. Now, I don't necessarily need to see you do this. Some of you are going to be able to start multiplying without writing it out specifically. However, if this helps you to kind of group those terms together so that you can see, okay, I got to multiply these numbers and I got to take care of these letters and then go on to the next grouping, I would encourage you to do that then until you start to feel maybe more comfortable with these problems that you don't have to do that step, okay? So we're going to take 3x and we're going to multiply that into the 2x squared, and then times the 4x, and then times the 5, -5. And that's why this last one has that negative sign there. So when you multiply, you're going to take 3 times the 2, and that's how they got 6. And then for your x's, you have x times x squared. Remember, this would have a 1, and so you add the exponents, 1 plus 2, and that's how they got a 3 down here for x to the third. For the next step, or the next terms, you take 3 times 4, which would be 12. And x times x, remember those each have an exponent of 1. That's how we get x squared. And then for this last one, you're taking that negative 3 and 5, or really it's 3 and a -5. They just put the negative in front. And that would be -15, and then the x just trails along. And this would be your answer right here. Okay? It's not anything too crazy, not anything too super complicated. You just have to kind of keep track of your terms and making sure that you're adding together your letters, not multiplying them, and getting the right exponent for those, okay? So, let's do this practice problem together. No, just kidding. You guys do this practice problem, and then we'll do the next example together here. So you guys go ahead and try to do this one. So I'm going to distribute this 2x through here. And so I should have had 4x to the third plus 2x squared, and then minus 6x. Let's take a look at this example together because we've got more than one letter, okay? We've got x's and we've got y's. It's no different than what we were doing though. We're still going to be multiplying our big coefficients together and then dealing with the letters individually. So we can only combine our x's and we can only combine our y's when we're adding them up with those exponents. We're still going to distribute, so I would still encourage you, if you need this, draw those arrows like I do. That just helps me remember to distribute to every single term so I don't forget to do that, because sometimes I see students do it to the first one and they forget to do it to the other ones, okay? So we're going to multiply 3 times 2, which would be 6. Now for your letters, you've got x squared times an x. So that would become x to the third. Then we also have to do this with our y's. We've got y to the fifth and y to the third. So 5 plus 3 would be 8. So that becomes y to the 8th power. Now we distribute into the next term. So 3 times the 4 would be 12. X squared times x would be x to the third. That term in the middle doesn't have any y's, so I just need to carry down the y to the fifth. Don't change that term at all. The last distributing here, we're taking 3 times negative 2, so that would be negative 6. There's no x on this last term, so I need to just bring down x squared. But then I've got y to the fifth times a y, which would be y to the 6th power. And there's your final answer. So now's your turn to practice with this type of example. So go ahead and take a minute and a half here, and go ahead and do that problem. Okay, so I would have started by distributing. And I got 10 x to the fifth, y to the fifth, plus 2 x to the fourth, y to the third, and then plus 2 x to the third, y to the sixth. All right, for these next couple of examples here, we're going to do our distributing again, but then we might have to distribute more than once for the two different sets of parentheses that they give us, and then we're going to work on combining like terms. So kind of going back to what we did in the last section, we look for those similar terms, the things with the same letters, and then we try to combine those to just simplify these problems just a little bit more. So, for example, on this first one that I've got kind of worked out here for us, we're going to take this 5n, we're going to distribute that into the first set of parentheses, and then on the second set, we're taking the negative 3 and we're distributing that. Okay, so when I did that down here, 5 times 3 was that 15, and then n and n squared was n to the third. Then for the second term, I would have 5 times 2, which is 10, n times n is n squared. And for the last term, 5 times a negative 4 was negative 20, and then that n. Now, for the second set of distributing I had to do, I needed to really watch that sign there, because it is a negative 3. So negative 3 times 6n squared was a negative 18 n squared, and then negative 3 times 7 was a negative 21. Then what I needed to do was try to find any like terms. So this is what we were doing in the previous section. You know, I see 15n to the third, but I don't see any other terms out here that have n to the third. So that one's just by itself, and you can see how I just dropped it down below. So it really just kind of took care of itself. Now, when I looked at my n squareds next, I had 10n squared, and I had a negative 18n squared. So those together became a negative 8n squared. Again, really watch your signs here with those negatives. Take your time, use a calculator to double check yourself if you're not that confident or comfortable with adding and subtracting these terms that have those opposite signs. Okay, so that took care of the n squareds. Then we look for n. So we have negative 20n, which again is the only one, so that just got dropped down. And then last is this negative 21, which doesn't have anything left to go with it. So again, that one also just got dropped down. And so this is your final answer. You do want your final answer to be in that descending order. So that means that you want to start like we did with the biggest exponent you see and then gradually work your way down so that it's in order, it's in proper form, it looks nice and polished. Okay? There are 2 practice problems here for you guys to try to do. So there's this first one, and here's the second one. I want you to pause your video, take your time to work through those 2 examples. Okay? Give yourself a good, 5-ish minutes or so to try to get both of those done. If you need more time, take more time. Watch your signs. Be really, really careful with those negatives. And then continue to watch to see what you got and see if it matches what you should have gotten. All right, for my first set, I needed to distribute that 4y. So it should have said 12y squared minus 8y to the third. Then I had to do another set of distributing, and it is a negative y, so really be careful with your signs on that one. So this became a negative 6y to the third, and then negative 5y squared, and then plus y. And I looked here. Now, they do have this one kind of out of order. They put the biggest exponents kind of in the middle. That negative 8y to the 3 and negative 6y to the third, those need to go together. The 12y squared and the negative 5y squared, those need to go together. And then your little y out here by himself, he's just going to tag along. So when we combined these, negative 8y to the third, negative 6y to the third, that would have been negative 14y to the third. 12y squared and negative 5y squared should have been 7y squared. And then the plus y just comes along. For the second practice problem, again we start by distributing. On that first set, should have said 56x to the fifth minus 28. And then for the second set of distributing, make sure you took a negative 2x times everything. And so that says negative 6x to the fifth, negative 4x to the third, and negative 8x. I've got 56x to the fifth and negative 6x to the fifth. Those have to go together. I've got a negative 4x to the third by itself. I've got a negative 8x by itself. And I've got a negative 28 by itself. So really the only terms I could have combined were those x to the fifths to get a 50x to the fifth. Then the minus 4x to the third goes next because I'm trying to put this in descending order. Then the minus 8x, and then the minus 28. And there's your final answer.